So according to a senior U.S. defense official, nearly 100% of Russia's pre-staged combat power is now inside Ukraine. And Russia is trying to supplement its forces in Ukraine with foreign fighters. This is all while Russian forces are increasing bombardments in major cities, including Kharkiv and Kyiv over there and Mariupol.
All right, so let's discuss that with CNN military analyst General Wesley Clark. He is the former NATO Supreme Allied Commander. General, thanks for being with us. Let's look at the map, and I want to kind of walk through where we're seeing some of the strength, at least, of the Russian forces thus far. The areas in red here is where the Russian forces have a presence. We know they early on came here in the south. We just heard from Nick Payton-Walsh. He's in Odessa, and we know that Ukrainian officials say that Russia is preparing to encircle Dnipro in central Ukraine. What's your assessment of their advances thus far?
So the Russian force has not performed up to expectations. Partly it's a function of weather, but more it's a function of the lack of training, motivation, and education of the Russian force. Nevertheless, they're a superior force in terms of materiel, and they do have air superiority, and they are now bombing airfields and making sure the remaining few Ukrainian aircraft are hobbled and kept on the ground if they can do that. So what they're doing is, still Kyiv is the main objective. They're moving in the outskirts of Kyiv to try to encircle it. The problem in the north is they've got to get close enough to the city center for their shorter range rockets to actually strike meaningful civilian targets. And they're facing some pretty heavy resistance in the outskirts. In the south, they're moving on Odessa. There's a fight around Mykolaiv, and the Ukrainians have regained Mykolaiv at one point. They're still fighting in there to block them. What we're looking at now is a bridge that's in the northern approaches out of Kharkiv toward Kyiv, where the Ukrainians blew it. Ukrainian civilians are trying to scramble out of the line of fire. And meanwhile, the Russian forces will be going to try to seize Dnipro and a major crossing site over the Dnieper River there and encircle the Ukrainian forces that are east of the Dnieper.
General, let's take a closer look now at what's happening in and around Kyiv. So here's a close-up. Here's a close-up. Thank you very much for the assist, Doctor. These are the suburban areas around Kyiv. So Ukrainian state emergency services reported that civilians were killed over here at a bakery in Mykolaiv, right here. And then in Irpin, right here, we saw that horrific family that was mowed down at what is supposed to be a civilian evacuation point. And then in Irpin also, we also see these tanks. This is Russian tanks. They're lining up near civilian apartments. This is just west of Kyiv. So what does all of this tell you about their strategy to get into Kyiv?
Well, this is the encirclement of Kyiv, and it starts from the outside and works in. What they found when they made a run straight into Kyiv is they got knocked out. And that was the fighting last week in the suburb of Bucha, which you show up there. Now the challenge for the Ukrainians is, can they come out into these suburbs like Irpin, where you see that Russian force, and can they take it out at night using javelins and rocket-propelled grenades, or snipers to pick off the Russian soldiers? Or do they let them simply close in on the city center? And as they close in on the city center, the risk to Kyiv grows. So the fight has to be taken to the Russians as they come in during the day. The Ukrainians have to come out at night or during the day and take those forces out bit by bit. The trafficability is still poor in the area, so the Russian forces are mostly road-bound. The roads have houses and other obstacles and bridges and overpasses, so it's eminently defendable terrain. They've got to defend it successfully.
All right, General, let's talk about these blue countries here. This shows the line of NATO countries around Belarus, which of course is allied with Russia and Ukraine. And the U.S. ambassador to the UN says that to NATO, says that they're not prepared to move forward with a no-fly zone. So we know the realities of the numbers, General. What's that mean, the significance that still no commitment to that? And we know the realities if they were to commit, what that would mean for the U.S. and Russia.
The no-fly zone is a straw man. It's thrown out there. People argue about it. All the former Mideast cognoscenti who think they know so much about military strategy will tell you can't do it because you have to do A, B, and C. That's all. It's not actually correct. The point is, there's got to be some support brought into the Ukrainians. Ukraine is fighting our fight. It's the most defensible country outside of NATO, and if it falls, it's much more difficult to defend that blue line of NATO. So the NATO countries know this, but they're operating under Putin's threat of a nuclear strike. Now, we don't know where that nuclear strike might come. We don't know if it's 1, 2, a dozen weapons, but everybody's running scared of it. And what Putin is impressed about no-fly zone, within a day, Putin says, oh, that would be an act of war, and we're going to come after you. And when there's a discussion about maybe Polish jets are going to come in, then he's going to think us and outmaneuver us. We've got to do less thinking in public and more acting in private to keep Ukraine in this fight. These people are fighting our fight for us.
General Wesley Clark, I got to jump in here. Thank you so much for the expertise.